Hello, this is an introduction into Illustrator. Illustrator is still very useful. I'd say absolutely for logos, for working with text, for doing some design of certain projects. Illustrator is still going to be your best bet versus Photoshop. Thinking about these Matisse collages, paper collages, absolutely something you could do artistically with Illustrator. So here we are in Illustrator, which is a program that I used to use a lot and don't use so much anymore. I'm primarily using Photoshop. We'll start off with the basics and kind of work our way up. So I'm just going to go to File and New, and this dialog box appears, and just use whatever you think you're working in. So this can always be changed later. Don't overthink it. I'm going to start with a print, just a basic letter size. All these templates, I've never used these, but I'm sure they work pretty cool. I'm going to make my orientation in a landscape so we can easily see it and create. And here's our artboard. Now, I'm going to first go to Window and Workspace. I'm using Essentials Classic because I like having all this stuff over here. Essentials, for some reason, doesn't have that. I'm sure it's somewhere else. But like I said, I'm used to a certain thing. I see no reason to change how I work, so I like having this. So I'm using Essentials Classic. And then I've just doubled up my group of tools over here. So we'll start with the basics of making shapes. So right here we have the pen tool. And right here we have our colors. So instead of foreground color and background color like Photoshop, we have what's called fill and stroke as two different colors. And so I'm going to click on my fill color, click on a color, and I'm actually going to click on my stroke and turn it off. So this means none right there. And this pen tool is essentially a click and click again to make a shape. If you click and hold, you'll create what are called Bezier curves. You can see these little handlebars that create curves, right? I let go and it's made this curve. And the next shape, you can tell, is going to kind of take this Bezier curve that I've already made into account as it makes the next mark, right? And so you can kind of just go around here and make a shape. And let's say you don't want to take into account, let's say I want to make a reverse curve. You'll see that Illustrator won't let me do that right now, right? Like it's looking at this. So if I want to make a sort of like a, let's say a sharp, pointy horn right here, it won't let me do that because it's looking at this curve. So to turn that off, just come back to that actual point that you just made with your pen tool and click it, and it will turn off that side of the Bezier curve. And then you can start here, click and hold, and I can make any sort of tool that I want, any sort of direction that I want. Right? And likewise, let's say I want to do that again, click there, and etc. Then you come to the end, and here we are. So we have our shape using the pen tool. I can adjust this in a variety of ways. We have two different selection tools. We have the selection tool, shortcut is V. This is how you can move things around, how you can rotate objects, how you can portion, scale objects, right? Of course, just like Photoshop, you hold down Shift, it's going to constrain proportions. Likewise, constrain your rotations to, I believe, 0, 45, and 90. The other selection tool we have is this one right here. It's called the Direct Selection tool. Shortcut is A. And in this one is where we can select little, the points, the vectors of the points of the vectors, and move them around. Likewise, the angles. If you want to change the actual angles that you have, both of them, you can, or let's say we have this one right here, which I don't, for some reason, don't see the sort of Bezier curves here. If you do want to see those, if you grab your pen tool, hover over that point, and hold down the Alt key and pull, you'll get those Bezier curves again, right? And so you can reshape your original shape. And then if I want to adjust this, I can go back to my Direct Selection tool and then change these handlebars. You'll notice that when I change this side comes along for a ride to make it look natural or whatever, for whatever reason. If you want to only affect one side, you can hold down Alt likewise, and then just affect just that side and not the other side. And then the other one will automatically understand that that's what you wanted to do. So that's one way you can make shapes in Illustrator. Move that off to the side. To change color, just come over here, grab the fill color, and change the fill color to whatever you want. I'm just using this color wheel. There's swatches. There's all sorts of ways to grab and use color. Move that guy over there. Let's go through a few other things. Let's see here. I'm going to use the shape tool. So the shape tool is how I've seen a lot of professional people draw in Illustrator, where they'll start with just maybe an ellipse or a rectangle, and then from that simple shape sort of build an image and move things around. So we'll draw that, and we'll draw, let's see, we'll make another shape down here, make that pink. And you can see as you build shapes, they start to build on one of another, right? And so to think about layering, how things are going, it's a little bit different than Photoshop. You can come over here to your layers, and you'll notice that all of them are on layer 1. If I scroll these down, I can see which ones, how they are ordered in layer 1. And so I can come over here and actually like move them to the position like you would in Photoshop, so that this one is now on top. In the past, I've typically just right-clicked on the one I want, and then go to arrange and either bring to front, bring forward, send backward, send it back. But you can of course come over here to treat it more like Photoshop. If you know for sure that you want, let's say, something always underneath everything, you make a new layer and then select that layer and then work on that. So I'll show you that real quick. We will make a black background circle, right? That's behind everything. And just go to layers and show you what happened. So this is on this layer. So you got to make sure if you want to go back to layer 1, you come down here and activate layer 1 so you're working on layer 1, right? And then what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to, let's say I like this black circle. I know that I want to use it. I want to kind of design around this. I don't want to be working in Illustrator and have to accidentally grab this and have it reactivate. So I'm going to lock it. And how you lock an object is Control 2 on the PC. And so now this is locked. Now I can't select it anymore accidentally. And if I want to unlock it, it's Control Alt 2. Oops, cancel. Control Alt 2 on PCs. And now everything is unlocked, right? And so yeah, you'll use that a lot so that you don't let's say you don't move things around. You will Control to it. All right, so yeah, and so like I said, like if you're working with shapes, let's bring this to the front. I've seen people where they will just make basic shapes and then add points to this and then adjust the points. So if you wanted to adjust this point, I'm using the pen tool just because it's easy to add and change the, if I hold down Alt, you can see that I can get a different sort of angle, right? And then if I just hold down Control, I can just move it. So I can have the pen tool on all the time. I don't actually have to go to the direct selection tool to do that. And so, and you can, yeah, move this around. You can add extra points, move those around. Hold down Alt to just move just that part. And so, yeah, you can see like from a circle, I made a shape that's not very, oops, circle-ish, right? And so that's, you know, that's how you can make shapes very easily. These current shapes that I've made have only had fills, so we'll go over how to do some strokes. Actually, first, let me go over a few more shapes. Polygonal tool. If you'll notice that you drag and drop and you give a certain polygon count. If you want to choose your polygon, you can just click once, and then this dialog box appears. It'll ask you how many sides you want, so that's how you get different sided polygons. And so now I have an 8-sided polygon. In the case of a star, if you click and drag, you'll notice you get the kind of stars for kids. If you hold down Alt, you get the stars for adults, right? And yeah, and likewise, your star, if you just click once, you'll get the question on how many points you want for the star. Yeah, so these are all have fills, as I said. Let's go over strokes. So this is your stroke color. You can change the color here. Let's say if I just want white, I'll grab this white up here. And then if I want to change what the stroke is, there's this button right here for the strokes. Right here is the weight of the stroke, how big the stroke is. And then there's some options under, let's see here. You might see just the weight. And so make sure you click on this to show options. And here is where you can change how the stroke works. So right now the stroke is aligned to the center. So you can see my vector line here. The stroke is kind of originating off the middle of that line. And then this is where you can change those selections. So if you want to align stroke to the inside, or a line stroke to the outside, those are right there. There's also some differences on different shapes, like how you do different caps. So if you have let's just show you. Right, if you have I pressed enter to stop doing that, and I'll turn off the fill. So it's just, this one is pure stroke. And we'll change the stroke color to a different color so you can see. And so this is where you can, get into these ideas of different caps. So I can have a round cap, and you can see how that changed right there. And then these corners with a stroke. Let's add a really horrible color. Actually, that's a beautiful color. I love that color. To that, and crank it up, and then change how the caps work. And you can see you can round join them, bevel join them, etc. All right. So that is making shapes. Let's see here. We went over the selection tool, pen tool, strokes. Let's talk a little bit about grouping. So let's say you put a few things together and you like them. There's no reason to have them as separate entities. It's time to kind of put them into what Illustrator uses as groups. So I'm going to grab these three items. I can either, you saw me click and drag a box to grab all three. I could grab one, hold down shift, grab the other, grab the third, and I have all three. And then I'm going to group them, and you control group for group, and now they're grouped. They come together wherever. If you want to adjust things within this group, you can ungroup them. You can also just double click any of that group, and you'll be brought into a group view. You can see at the top here it has layer 1 and group. If you see anything grayed out, you are in a group view. And then inside the group view, you can change things individually. Again, either by using any of the direct selection tools, the pen tools, any number of things, right, that you want. And then just double click out to get out, and then you're back into the group or the regular view. When I worked in Illustrator, I would usually always have duplicates as I kind of worked with things. So I would actually work, vectors are a mathematical equation, so they can be any size and resize later on. So I would typically have trial 1 here, and then I would hold down Alt and make another group. I'm going to delete this stuff. And then Alt drag and drop another one, and Alt drag and drop another one, and then experiment a little bit. Like, oh, maybe I should move this. Maybe I should move this point over a little bit, or whatever, right? And then what's really nice is you can look at that and say, oh, actually, this one's great, that one sucks, and kind of go from there. Let's see, let's get rid of all this stuff, and I'll make another shape. And I'm going to turn off the stroke. And let's grab a star and a different color. And you'll see that if I have something selected, it will actually change the color. So if, let's say I want to keep that blue, I want to make sure I click off that first. So I just control click off of that. And now I don't have that. And so now when I change the color, it doesn't change the color of this. So that now I can make this star right next to it. So the other thing I would really consider using when you're making shapes in Illustrator is what's called the Pathfinder tool. And that is probably not set up on your Illustrator. It's hidden under Window, and you can find it here. And then I just actually dragged and dropped mine into this toolbar here so that I always have access to it. And so the Pathfinder tool is really useful. Let's say, let's say you wanted to cut a star out of a square. This is what I would use. You would put the star inside of the square where you wanted it. Select both of them, and then you could use this minus the front button, right? And so now it has cut that star out of that rectangle. Go back a few stages, and this Pathfinder tool has a variety of options to work with. I'll put that off to the side. You can see if you unite them, puts them together. If I do what's called an intersect, it intersects between those points. I don't know what this is called. Exclude, so it excludes when they override each other. And it's kind of cool. Like, you can make some interesting shapes with this. And then you can go in here and then change these things individually. You'll notice that right away it makes it into a group, and it makes it all in one fill color. I think it's usually the back fill color, or was it the front color? It was the front color. So let's go back, grab both of them. You have to have more than one object selected to do this, and then hit the exclude button. And then you can double click in here, and then you can, you can play around with like moving these things around a variety of ways. And changing the color if you wanted to change the color, right? And then click off. So yeah, the Pathfinder tool is extremely useful for that effect too. So here we went over layering your the objects you have. Let's go over some text now. Let's go to another item here. Yeah, you'll use text a lot in Illustrator too. Like that's a good reason to be using text. I still think that it's better than Photoshop for using text. So I'll make some text, just typed it in there. And then I'm just going to grab my selection tool and make it larger. Like I said earlier, back when I used to use Illustrator more, I would make duplicates of it as I kind of attempted to try different text to see which one worked. And so, you highlight one, come up here and you can change the typeface that you're using, right? To try different variations of what you want to get across. Right? In Illustrator, there's something called kerning. Design. I'm sorry. There's something called kerning. You can affect that over here. This part right here is for kerning the entire set. So you can see that the designer of this has a negative impact, but I can change all of that right here. And so kerning is, of course, the distance between the letters. This one right here is for the individual letters between the letters. So when you're in here between the E and the L, if you change this, it will only affect the space between E and L. And so you can actually do that. I like doing that visually, actually, preferably. So I'm just using the arrow key, the left and right arrow key, to move to the space I want to move to. And then holding down Alt and then the arrow key. And you can see that it moves things closer or further away. And, with design, you can typically do quite a lot of things with just using text that you have and then kerning it, changing it some way, somehow. What you can also do with text, you could create outlines. So right now it's a text, and so you'll notice it has no vector to it, right? That's because it's interchangeable. You can change it. But if you know that you like the text, you know that you like the way that it's kerned, where it's at, you can right-click on it and create outlines. And then right now this has, if I click on the direct selection tool, you can see it. This now has points, right, that have Bezier curves and are vectorized, right? And so now you can come in here and you can highlight these individual points and, change it. Move it around. If you use the pen tool, you can change the anchor. You can either delete points, right, by using this pen tool and then hovering over a point and hitting delete. And you can adjust these things however you want. So you can kind of start with like a professionally designed font and text and then slightly adjust it to suit your needs. You'll notice that whenever you've created outlines that this makes it into a group. And so likewise, just as I showed earlier, if you double click into it, you can come in here and start playing around with moving things inside that group. So maybe like this O could be like rolling away, right? Put it off to the side. Yeah. And so I think that's basically the starting point. I would just start playing around with that and to work on design. The last thing let's kind of show you a few things that I've done in the past. This is a t-shirt design I did with all these characters. And yeah, I did that with this process of drawing these shapes, putting these shapes together using strokes, etc. I actually started with a sketch, which of course you're welcome to also work with. So you can place, let's see here. Yep, place. You can place any sketch that you might have. I'm going to bring in a photo just to show you some other things you can do. So here's a photo of, actually I don't want that one. Let's bring in this one. So here's a photo of Hyperion, one of, I believe, Saturn's moons. I forget. But yeah, so you could bring in any image, any photo, crank down the opacity, which is right here, I think. Yep. Oh, I gotta have that highlighted, sorry. And then you could, you could draw on top of this and use this as a guide. If you get tired of seeing all these like marks, just control to it, and now you don't have to look at those more. So yeah, either a sketch that you've made, a photo that you've seen, you could throw it into Illustrator and draw on top. What you can also do is, what's really nice with Illustrator is you can use what's called the trace function. And so back in my day, this used to be a separate program called Streamline, something in between Photoshop and Illustrator. But trace allows you to take a photo, a drawing, and essentially turn it into vectors. So I brought in this photo, I click on it. At the top here, you see I have this option right here to call image trace. And I'm just going to start it by hitting 6 colors and see what it looks like. And so you can see that it's abstracted this and looked at the image and made it into an Illustrator file with vectors. If I go to this button right here, Image Trace Panel, this is where I control the settings. So right now, it's got 6 colors, limited palette. It's kind of nice. You can change all these things. And right here is how many colors you can have. So the more colors you have, the more steps it's going to have. The less colors you have, the simpler it's going to look. And so you can kind of play around with that and of course open up your advanced. I don't remember ever using any of this. I just kind of follow some of the presets and then adjust the colors personally until I get that effect that I want. You've probably seen this in like contemporary painting, like someone doing this. So you can absolutely use Illustrator to help you understand like how an image could be broken down into vectors. But once you're happy with it, I'm just going to close this because I'm happy with it. You need to expand it. So right now it's still kind of in this in-between state where it's been vectorized, but it's not currently actual vectors, right? So yeah, I don't see those little lines. And so I expand it, and then now it's made up of all these vectors, right? These lines. And then you can, of course, come in here and adjust these. I can double click to get into that group, and I can move these around. I can adjust these like I have just shown you. Let's go over a few other things. Let's say you want to grab all this color. So I clicked on this color, or this little shape. I go to select, and I can grab the same fill color, right? I can grab the same opacity. I can grab the same stroke weight, etc. There's all kinds of ways to grab the same item. And so I grab all those colors, and then I can come over here and, either drastically or not so drastically change all those colors, right? Oops, let's keep that as it is, yeah. I'm just double clicking in there, hitting OK. Right? So yeah, that should get you started in terms of like using Illustrator to make whatever projects or items you're thinking about it. Thanks.